este mensaje y creo que la presentación de Santi ha servido de puente entre el primer bloque y el segundo. El primer bloque, que tenía un poco como hilo conductor la inversión del ciudadano en energías renovables y qué papel podrían jugar las administraciones locales y nacionales y supranacionales para o fomentarlo o poner barreras, y que en sus manos recae mucho. Y me agrade mucho de poder presentar ahora a Alexandra Somsde, que es Policy Officer. Yo entiendo que se traduce un poco como funcionario de política del Directorado General de Energía de la Comisión Europea. Entonces, Alexandra, tienes un poquito más de tiempo porque eres una invitada especial. Te vamos a dar 20 minutos.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting the European Commission to join you. You've been talking a lot about Europe, so I will try to come up with some enlightenment and bring some answers to some of the questions. So my name is Alexandra Somsde. I've been working for the European Commission for 9 years, focusing before on China, India, and since 2 years focusing on renewable. And we are a team of 2 people that are mainly focusing on energy prosumers and cooperatives, so I'm one of these 2. So before I get started, since I introduced myself, I would like to get to know you. So I would like to know who in this room represents municipalities. Can you raise your hand? No one. Who is member of a cooperative? Okay, and who is just a citizen? Not so many citizens, right? Thank you. The President of the European Commission told us when he arrived back in 2014 that he wants to reform and reorganize Europe's energy policy and have a real energy union. What maybe you don't know is that until recent year, the Treaty of the European Union didn't even have an article on energy policy. Since few years, we now have an article in the treaty that empowers the European Commission and other institutions to touch on energy. So before that, it was a competence only in member states. So in Spain, in Belgium, etc. So not for the EU level. So last year we came up with what is called the Energy Union, and our objective is to have a secure, sustainable, competitive and affordable energy for every European. That's the policy statement. It means that we have to ensure energy security. A colleague of yours just mentioned the independence issue that you have in Spain. It's true also for the EU as a whole. Solidarity. Back in 2009, we had a severe problem of oil and gas supply, and some member states, mainly in the Baltic region, were cut off the grid for 4 days. We want to go to a fully integrated internal energy market. We want to ensure a high rise in energy efficiency, since the most efficient energy is the one that you do not consume, of course. We want to go towards a low-carbon society, and we want to promote research, innovation, and competitiveness. So that's what is the Energy Union about. So you might say it's a bit everything and nothing, but this is our framework, and within that, we have to advance energy efficiency and renewable energy. I would like to emphasize the fact that in this new document that is now our pathway, there is a strong emphasis on citizen, and this is why I underline it. For the first time ever in a text at the EU level, citizens were given a strong role in a text, and that is important because this allows us, as European Commission, to kickstart changes and then talk to you and talk about your issue. So as I said, consumers are central to the Energy Union, and we have stated that with citizens at its core, everyone will benefit from technology to reduce their bill and participate actively to the energy market. That means that we are also turning slowly but surely to definition of prosumer. Currently, there is a real issue with consumer satisfaction about energy in Europe. So you can see that people are satisfied with postal service, but when it comes to electricity and gas, there is a real issue. Consumers are not satisfied for several reasons, but still, it's important to know. Second thing, the energy landscape has evolved. When the EU was created right after the Second World War, the aim was to secure coal for all EU citizens. Now we have a high penetration of photovoltaic panel on rooftop. We assess that we could have by 2030 almost 2.5 million EU households with PV rooftop. It could be even higher in some countries like Belgium, Luxembourg, Denmark. We have seen a contribution of energy communities that has increased. In Germany, for instance, half of renewable energy power is in the hand of private individuals. So the scheme that was set up right after the Second World War doesn't fit anymore the new energy market and the new landscape. The current EU regulatory schemes has different treatment and different market rules that are often designated for traditional sources of generation, and this is no longer justified. This actually includes advantage for certain technology, and most of the time for fossil fuels technology. And this is for a fact, and the European Commission acknowledges. This is a big change. So we need to factor in civil society, we need to factor in self-consumption, so as to also avoid disruption to the networks. The way we work is that we have targets. This is the EU regulatory scheme. So for 2020, we have set targets that was agreed by every 28 member states to reach 20% renewable energy in the energy mix. And then this was broken down in targets for each individual member states. So Spain has a specific target, France has another specific target, and this is binding, this is mandatory, meaning that if a country doesn't reach them, the European Commission has the power to kickstart an infraction procedure. For 2030, we have a different framework, meaning that we have a new target that is at least 27% renewable energy. And then you see the other one for the other sector. But there we do not have any more specific target for each member state. This is what we call the EU-wide targets, which makes our work very much more difficult because we do not have benchmark anymore to oblige member states to obey by some rules. So we will have to find a collective way to approach these targets. And this will end up in an iterative process and something different that we are currently working on. Now, let's talk about the topic of today. In the current framework, that is the Renewable Energy Directive that was adopted in 2009, there are no EU legal definition on self-consumption, no definition about energy cooperative either. It doesn't exist in EU law. We have highlighted in 2014 the best practices for self-consumption. So the European Commission has listed already what exists and is bringing this to the attention of its member states. And we have different national legislation that in some cases prohibit self-consumption or lead to market fragmentation because of barriers of different natures, such as financial or administrative. This is a reality that you know. Some of you have been raising this for the Spanish case, but it's also true in some other member states. And on top of that, you have been experiencing some sometimes retroactive changes into the legislation, and you have been talking about the 62,000 families in Spain. And of course, this is an important issue. But this was not only in Spain, we had that also in Belgium, we had that also in Greece. So it concerns every single country in the EU, so that is something that is shared, but this is a member state's competence. As I said in my introduction, the European Commission and the European institutions are newly competent on energy. And every member state is free of choosing its own energy mix, meaning that we, as a European institution, we can ensure that they satisfy their target, but we cannot decide which type of legislation they should implement or enforce. This is democracy, and it goes about national democracy, national parliament, national government. So this is not our role. Yet, we clearly see that there is a need for consumer empowerment, and this was formally acknowledged by the European Commission in our communication from last year. I would like to quote this important sentence saying that we need to provide consumers with frequent access, including the near real time, to partially standardized, meaningful, accurate and understandable information on consumption and related costs, and also the type of energy sources. So here, this is our list of actions, so to say. So we have to touch on all these issues. So this I already explained, so I won't stay for this. So currently, my services is working on a revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. And this is why I was invited here to talk to you, because we are currently, technically drafting the new legislation that will be proposed to the legislator. The legislator at the EU level, that's the Council of Member States, so your national governments, the 28th, plus the European Parliament, so your parliamentarian. So we will be only proposing a text, but of course we have the pen, so it's in an important process, right? In this drafting process, we have to achieve at least 27% renewable energy share. This was agreed by the EU heads of state, so this is our line to take. We have to further integrate renewable energy into the market. We have to touch more on heating and cooling, because in the past directives this was not so much a focus, and we have lacked actually some more activities on this. We have to work in the transport sector. We also have a target for the transport sector, but at the EU level some more action is needed. And we have to empower consumer and remove administrative barrier. So I have not drafted these slides to please you. This is the official line to take of the European Commission, right? So you can see that in the order of priority, consumer is well on. So that's important to know that at the European Commission level, then I don't know what will happen with the member states, but at the European Commission level, this is properly on the agenda. I told you before that in 2014, the European Commission listed the best practice on self-consumption. And it's important because this will be the base for our work to draft the directive. So, the first thing was a consumer right to self-consumption. In some countries, it's not that obvious that this is a right. A preference to be given to direct self-consumption over injection to the grid. Why is that? Because the grid network is something that was created not for renewable energy, obviously. It was created way before. It has to be adapted, of course, but adaptations are slow, and it's preferable to have self-consumption than inject to the grid, because then you could disturb the grid. So first, self-consumption, and then injection. This should not be prevented, but it's an order of priority. Limiting net metering scheme, avoid retroactive changes, that we have been discussing several times today already. Giving the right market signal through time of use tariffs, that's important. And ensure predictable conditions by having a stable legislative framework. Concretely, empowering citizens means getting informed via smart solutions about energy consumption, how to switch to green tariff, and what are the best available technology. So information is key. Empower local communities. In our jargon, we talk about local communities and not about cooperatives, because you have also municipalities that carry out projects similar to cooperatives. So it's in order to encompass those municipalities that are willing to take similar actions. Involve municipalities and consumers so that they benefit from decentralized renewable energy. Work on home producing energy, and reinforce training and information. The training to get the right installation is important, because then it's secure, high quality installation, and of course sustainability. And finally, this is not mentioned here, there is a need to focus on the removing on administrative barriers, and I will come back to this later on in the options we have in mind. So our objective is twofold here: to facilitate cost-effectiveness development of small-scale renewable energy generation, including self-consumption and energy cooperatives/communities. Ensure that projects are facilitated by reducing the risk and avoid costs that they cannot manage until they can compete on the market. Then they should be on the market. But until they cannot, they have to avoid those costs and those risks. And this is important for us, so that these new players can actually enter the market. Some of you have been talking about the role of local communities, and we have been assessing at the EU level that indeed you increase local acceptance of renewable energy projects, you contribute to renewable energy targets, you empower consumers, you bring added value to the local economy, meaning that you actually create jobs. You create local employment, as I said, and you can reduce price for the end consumer. All in all, innovation by consumer has often led to innovation for consumer. And this had opened up new business model and new way to think through the energy market. Let me touch a little on local acceptance. We can see that 9 in 10 Europeans think that it is important for their government to set renewable energy targets. So there is an agreement on that. However, we have seen lots of opposition at local level. In Belgium, in Denmark, in France, this is often happening. And energy cooperatives can actually waive all this concern and reduce the length of the procedure and therefore the costs. So that will be key to promote the role of local communities in the next renewable energy directive. So concretely, what are the options ahead of us for us who are writing this directive? This is not written down because I'm not authorized to write it down. I will name what we are currently looking at. And again, what I say here are options, because the final decision lays in the College of Commissioners, to which Miguel Arias Cañete is of course part of, as all the other 27 EU commissioners. So first, we think there is a need to have an EU definition of prosumer, energy communities, and microgrid, because there is no recognition for the time being. There is obviously the need to grant the right, below a certain capacity threshold, the right to generate and store renewable electricity for your own use without the supplier permission, and limit the administrative burden. A third option could be to grant local authorities and energy communities the right to operate as one joint interface with the market, such as an aggregator, even when consumer or supplier points are not located at the same distance. A fourth option could be to grant the right to sell excess renewable electricity to the wholesale market. A fifth option could be to allow member states to support small-scale renewable energy through feed-in tariff instead of feed-in premium. Such options will be discussed within the framework of the new Renewable Energy Directive. And then in parallel, and I think this is actually the title of my presentation, we work on the new design of the European energy market. And in there, we are also considering some options. You know that every energy supplier, RWE or big producers, they have balancing obligation. Some people argue that prosumers, energy communities, should also have the same balancing obligation. We think that we could waive those obligations for local communities, local cooperatives, because it's too burdensome. A second option could be to ensure that network access and connection tariffs are designed in a way that incentive self-consumption, and it's fair to reflect the use of the network by the system. A third option could be to prohibit measures that impose on consumer disproportionate change via contribution to the network, connection fees, etc., etc. So these are all options we are currently looking at. And I think I have to stop. You will find in my presentation that you will have a small focus on guarantee of origin. It's about tools to track the renewable energy sources or the energy sources. What is your energy made of? Some good practice for developing the guarantee of origin system. And by closing, I would like to remind you two things, or inform you about two things. For the European Commission, it was extremely important to have a new counterpart, meaning RESCOP, because until 2 years ago, we didn't know to whom to talk about energy cooperative. When we need a figure, when we need some policy argument, we had no counterpart to talk to. And the fact that you guys have gathered in RESCOP is extremely important. It's extremely important to lobby, I don't like this word, but it's extremely important to have your representation in Brussels and to go and explain to the parliamentary, to the member states, etc., what it is about. Second, everything that I said might just disappear if your national government doesn't want to adopt such legislation. So at the end of the day, that's the 28 member states that will decide on what we will propose. So of course we will be ambitious in our proposal, but it's important to go vote for the right people that will actually stand up for your concerns. So all in all, it's about democracy. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Alexandra, por esa información y el mensaje inspirador también. Creo que ha sido claro lo que tenemos que hacer. Voy a abrir un turno de preguntas porque Alexandra se tiene que marchar dentro de 15 minutos. No se puede quedar hasta el final en el debate. Entonces, Johannes ya me ha dicho que quería comentar algo.
Sí, bueno, quería justificar de alguna manera... Sí, quería justificar de alguna manera la no presencia tanto del Ente Vasco de la Energía como del Gobierno vasco. Durante el mes pasado ha habido una insistencia por mi parte como representante de Goyener, creo que no me he presentado, soy Johannes, y bueno, han justificado con un viaje técnico a Sudáfrica, han justificado por otra parte que están trabajando el nuevo marco para las energías renovables y está expuesto a alegaciones en el Gobierno vasco, con lo cual no veían oportuno debatir políticamente ese nuevo marco. Bueno, nos toca aceptar las disculpas, seguiremos trabajando para que la próxima vez estén aquí. Lo que está claro es que si hoy, en vez de una asamblea de energía social o una asamblea de RESCOP, hubiera sido una asamblea de una gran compañía, pues seguramente estarían aquí con todos nosotros. Pero bueno, contamos con tu presencia y esperemos que y la de todos vosotros que sirva para presionar a nuestras instituciones.
¿Alguna pregunta directamente a Alex?
Pues muchas gracias por haber venido. Mi nombre es Sara Pizzinato, soy de Greenpeace. Y tenía una pregunta sobre los planes para la nueva Directiva Europea de Renovables. Aparte de todas estas opciones para reducir los costes de las instalaciones colectivas, sociales, de prosumidores. Mi pregunta es, el espíritu de la Directiva de Eficiencia Energética y de renovables de poner en valor los beneficios de las energías renovables, del ahorro, etcétera, poner en valor en términos económicos. ¿Se va a trasladar también a estas instalaciones? Es decir, el debate no será solamente sobre cuáles son los costes que tienes que sufragar a través de estas instalaciones, sino también se va a poner en valor cuáles son los beneficios que estas instalaciones ponen.
So yes, we have to. I mean, in the legislative process, there is a mandatory step that is called the impact assessment. So before we table a new legislative proposal, we have to assess its impact. So all of it, employment, social, economic, microeconomic, positive, negative. So this will all be screened through. So yes, the answer is yes. And the mere fact that the European Commission sends me here is to talk about the positiveness of renewable energy, as I mentioned in this slide where I showed all the positiveness about local communities and the fact that this is the official line to take of the European Commission. It's a double yes.
Yes. Good morning. Congratulations you all for the work you are doing. Do you think it's likely for the large companies to allow you do anything in this field? Because it's a great revolution, definitely. So, which is the probability of all this to be properly done and to open a new future in energetic policies?
Well, there is no doubt that the nuclear industry, the coal industry will be trying to lower down such a tax, no doubt, and this is the role of lobbying. But what I see so far, what I see from the discussion also with the cabinet of the commissioner himself or the cabinet of the presidents, makes me very positive. Currently, what we have on paper and the discussions that the policy options discussions that we have with the politicians is very positive. So far, so good.
Great surprise for me. So, congratulations again. Let's do it.
It was also a surprise for me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, one last question. Una última pregunta. Eduardo, ahí.
¿Qué previsión hay de que las garantías de origen sean de verdad un coste para la gente que está utilizando combustibles fósiles? Porque, bueno, el origen de eso fue tratar de penalizar y luego, con las presiones, de alguna forma, pues se llegó a dilatar ese pago. Yo creo que es un tema que es muy importante. Nosotros desde Goiener estamos muy concienciados con las garantías de origen, pero si valiesen dinero, pues sería algo muy útil.
Well, the first step is to extend the guarantee of origin to all sources of energy, and this is not yet the case. And this will be a difficult battle already. And then if there is no issuance of this guarantee of origin, since this would be in the legal text, then of course you could have infraction procedure, etc. But first you have to secure that in the text this is extended to all the guarantee of origin, and as you see, this is our objective.
Okay, I think in the interest of time we need to terminate here, so muchas gracias.